You know, the funny thing is about the middle of the 18th century is that it reflects a lot of what we're seeing today, right? So it was a time when technology was really disrupting all manner of things, right? Media companies for certain, but even brand and marketing companies that are looking to create products. Technology was disrupting a lot of those products. And we started to see new forms of advertising and marketing also come in. So in many ways, the middle of the 19th century was very, very much like what we see today. The interesting thing is that in those days, we started to see media become much more sort of central to small-oriented groups. And so it gave birth to a lot of companies that started to create their own media. What we're seeing today is a similar trend where we see companies starting to create their own media properties. Why? Because quite frankly, they're trying to create trust and truth with the audiences, their customers, that they want to engage. And so that trend is that trust is at such an all-time low, truth is at an all-time low, and our trust in the institutions is at an all-time low. So it's a really interesting opportunity for us as product companies to be able to create those audiences and become the trusted source of interesting things. And so it's interesting, if you even follow sort of the history of the mid-19th century, you can see sort of as we got into the early 1900s, it started to change. And I think we're starting to see that change even here. It's a great question. And so how we look at what happened in the middle of the 19th century to how it applies today is that we can take the same opportunities. We can look at the history, and interestingly, if you actually look at the history of the mid-19th century and as it changed into the 20th century, what happened was truth and trust was restored by what? Privacy. We started to see the American people, European people, really all around the globe, this concern with how the media was treating privacy as a means of saying trust in what it is we're reading, what it is we're consuming is most important. And you even had some Supreme Court decisions that came around at that time that sort of started to establish this idea of privacy. We can start to see that happening today, right? With the idea of GDPR, with the CCPA in California, with what's happening in Brazil, all over the world, we're starting to see privacy become a very big concern among citizens, and thus the idea of creating trust with our brand is even more important than it's ever been. Yeah, where we have to be conscious as, you know, because most of us aren't Google, most of us aren't Twitch, most of us aren't Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, right? Most of us are running marketing for product and brand companies that use those platforms to reach the audiences we're trying to reach. And so just as they are media companies, you know, we are using them to reach our audiences, and theoretically those audiences have trust in those platforms and thus have trust in us. But we find that's not true, right? We find that there are bad actors all over the map here. So what we have to be conscious of as product marketers and brands is that as we start collecting data on our customers, that we're not those bad actors, that we are treating our customer data with the same care and respect as we do our customer data. And if we do that, we can start to differentiate from the Facebooks and Twitters and LinkedIns, and our privacy can actually become a marketing differentiator. So when we think of trust and truth, the thing that we hold as true is different than fact, because we all have seen the same facts, and many of us come to different conclusions. We believe different things based on those facts. It is, quite frankly, as my screenwriting professor told me years ago, the idea that fact isn't truth, it's what we believe about the facts to be the truth. Thus, our responsibility and opportunity as marketers is to synthesize those facts into something compelling that makes our audiences care, to make them believe, to make them trust us in that truth. And if we can do that, if we can pull facts together, so it's more than just sort of listing out feature A, feature B, feature C, those are the facts. How do we start synthesizing that content in a way that makes people really care? Now, of course, that's the heart of advertising, it's the heart of marketing, right? How do we actually write something that actually people will care about? But when we start writing content like thought leadership or editorial or inspirational content or entertaining content, it's the same process. It's not just listing the facts of a thought leadership paper. It's not just listing the facts of what happened in a particular event or something like that. We actually have to synthesize those things into something, a point of view that our audience is going to care about. That's the difference these days, and it's a new muscle for many organizations. That's right. You shouldn't until they give you the same value as the Financial Times, right? So that's the problem with banks these days, is they're all like 5% loans, we have this mortgage, this is what it means to get your credit checked, this is, they sort of have the list of facts of what it means to be financially literate, and you go, great, but I can get that anywhere on the web, and I can certainly get it from the Financial Times. What the Financial Times gives me is something that those banks aren't giving me. And so you won't trust, that's the point, is you won't trust those banks, you won't trust those financial institutions until they deliver the same kind of value that the Financial Times gives you. That may be through the Financial Times, or it may be through an email newsletter, or it may be through a blog, or it may be through a number of things. I think of Jyske Bank as a great example of this. They're delivering that trusted content in much the same way that the Financial Times would, but they're delivering it for a different purpose. Oh, of course. As you might expect, there's a dark side to that as well, right? There can be no light without the dark, right? Says, Darth Vader and all the rest. So, yes, of course, in the acquisition space, there is a risk that when we make that acquisition, either we don't do it well and we lose the trust of the audience that we have, bought, basically, and that can be a big risk. But the upside is that we're actually getting not only an audience that trusts a content brand in the acquisition, but we actually have a team that knows how to deliver that trust, right? We're getting people journalists and editors and designers and communicators who actually know how to deliver that content in a compelling way. And so what we have to do as business managers is be able to weigh the balance, right? Can we as a brand acquire this company, acquire this blog, acquire this media company in a way that will enable us to get to our goals, both in the short term and the long term, without spoiling the trust of the audience? It is a new equation, and there is a dark side, but there is a big upside too. What the Lego movie can teach us about all kinds of things in content, so many things, but the one thing that I absolutely adore about what they did was they didn't take their product and go to Hollywood and say, here's our product, make a movie out of this. What they did was they went to Hollywood and they said, we want to make a great movie, go make that, and we'll make whatever product comes out of that. That's the difference. And if we start applying that to our own businesses, right? So start thinking to yourself, and you may not be a Lego company, you may be a law firm, or you may be, a widget maker. Independent of that, start asking yourself, what value through content can we deliver to our audience? And let's let that affect the way that we deliver our product.